On the morning of April the 7th, 1989, a Soviet nuclear submarine designated K-278 was running at a depth of 386 meters in the Norwegian Sea, returning from patrol. At 11:03 in the morning, a fire broke out in the rear compartment. Within hours, the submarine was gone, taking 42 of her crew and 2 nuclear-tipped torpedoes to a depth of 1,680 meters. That part of the story is documented, investigated, officially closed. What isn't closed is everything that's happened since. Every scientific expedition that has visited the wreck in 93, 95, 2007, 2012, 2019 has measured radioactive contamination in the water directly above the hull. The reactor is corroding. The torpedo compartment is corroding. And according to the Institute of Marine Research in Norway, the rate of leakage has been increasing. 36 years after she went down, K-278 is still an active radiological concern. The submarine hasn't finished its mission. It's just conducting it very, very slowly. To understand why K-278 matters, you need to understand what she actually was. She was the sole vessel of Project 685, known in the West by the NATO designation Mike. Designed in the 1970s by the Rubin Central Design Bureau in Leningrad, she was conceived as a proof of concept, a submarine that could operate at depths so extreme that no existing Western weapon system could threaten her. The engineering solution was titanium. Her pressure hull was constructed from a titanium-magnesium alloy, as material with a strength-to-weight ratio roughly 4 times that of naval steel, and near total resistance to saltwater corrosion. Working titanium at that scale required purpose-built infrastructure. The Soviet Navy constructed an entirely new fabrication plant at Severodvinsk, specifically for this one vessel. The result was a submarine rated to 1,000 meters, more than twice the operational depth of any NATO counterpart at the time. At those depths, water pressure exceeds 100 atmospheres. No torpedo of the era had a guidance system that could function there. No depth charge could be reliably set to detonate at that depth. By the physics of the problem, she was unreachable. Her armament reflected this doctrine. Rather than the volume fire approach of most Soviet submarines, K-278 carried a small complement of weapons, including 2 Type 65 torpedoes fitted with nuclear warheads, designed to be fired from depths where pursuit was impossible. Strike deep, then go deeper. Her crew had an informal name for her, the Golden Fish. It acknowledged both her cost, estimated at over 1 billion rubles, and the quiet certainty that she was simply too valuable, too capable, too singular to be lost. The Soviet Navy shared that certainty. For 6 years, she operated without a serious incident. The sequence of events on April 7th has been reconstructed from survivor testimony, flight recorder data, and the official Soviet investigation report, a document that was only partially declassified as after the Soviet Union dissolved. At 11:03 local time, an automated sensor in the 7th compartment registered a fire. The compartment housed the submarine's electrical systems and one of her turbo generators. The initial response was standard. The section was sealed and flooded with freon. The fire did not go out. What followed is where the accounts diverge. Survivors described a cascading failure of fire suppression systems. The investigation found evidence of design flaws in the ventilation architecture that allowed the fire to migrate between sealed sections. The official report attributed the disaster primarily to crew error. Surviving crew members disputed that characterization for the rest of their lives. By 2 in the afternoon, K-278 had surfaced. standard procedure when a fire cannot be contained below. But surfacing does not extinguish a fire that has already penetrated the hull's internal structure. At 5:08 in the evening, the order to abandon ship was given. The water temperature was 2 degrees Celsius. The nearest rescue vessel was hours away. In water that cold, a person without a dry immersion suit loses consciousness in under 10 minutes. Most of the crew did not have dry immersion suits. 69 men were aboard. 27 were recovered alive. 42 were not. At 5:08 in the evening, K-278 went to the bottom, taking her reactor and her dead to a depth that placed both permanently beyond reach. The wreck sits at 73 degrees, 43 minutes north, 13 degrees, 16 minutes east, 1,680 meters down. Absolute darkness, 168 atmospheres of pressure. The titanium hull, the same material that made her nearly indestructible in service, turns out to be only relatively indestructible on the seafloor. Titanium resists corrosion far better than steel, but not indefinitely. At those depths, in the specific chemical environment of the deep Norwegian Sea, degradation is slow, but it is continuous. The first joint Russian-Norwegian scientific expedition reached the site in 1993. Water samples taken within 50 meters of the hull showed elevated levels of cesium-137 and other fission products consistent with reactor coolant leakage. The concentrations were low, within ranges scientists described as not immediately alarming. They were not zero. Every expedition since has recorded the same signature. The 2019 expedition, conducted by the Norwegian Institute of Marine Research in cooperation with Rosatom, found cesium-137 concentrations near the submarine's ventilation shafts at levels 800 times above the normal background for that region of the ocean, still far below thresholds considered hazardous for human consumption. Still moving in one direction. The concern is not the present level, it's the trajectory. K-278 carries 2 nuclear torpedo warheads. They are housed in the forward torpedo room, which the 2019 expedition confirmed is showing visible structural deterioration. Norwegian researchers have modeled what happens when the torpedo casings eventually fail. Their published estimate, a localized but significant contamination event in a section of the Norwegian Sea that sits upstream of major Atlantic fish migration routes. Russia's position has been that the risk is manageable and monitoring is sufficient. Norway has consistently called for more active remediation. The debate is ongoing. The corrosion is not waiting for it to resolve. On April 7th of each year, the Russian Navy holds a memorial. A vessel sails out to the approximate coordinates. Flowers are placed on the water. The ceremony lasts about 20 minutes. Below that ceremony, at a depth that makes recovery effectively impossible, 42 men remain inside the submarine. Russia has never attempted to retrieve them. The depth, the cost, and the radiation have kept any such proposal from moving beyond preliminary discussion. There is a particular quality to the story of K-278 that sets it apart from other Cold War naval disasters. Most wrecks are inert. They decay, they corrode, they become part of the seafloor. They stop mattering. K-278 hasn't reached that point. She is still, in a measurable and documented sense, interacting with her environment. The reactor that once powered her is now slowly contaminating the water above her. The weapons she was never meant to use are gradually becoming a different kind of threat. The Soviet Union built her to be unreachable. They succeeded. They just didn't specify for how long that would remain a problem.